My husband confessed that he loved my sister, and then he promised he would change. But just a week later, he left me, refused to be a father to our daughter, and everything went into chaos. I kept a secret about my sister, a secret that led everything to a dead end. And now, as I prepare to leave and find peace, she shows up with an apology. But will those apologies be enough to heal these wounds? My story began on an ordinary evening. My husband and I had just finished dinner, like any other night, but that night, he wasn't like he usually was. He kept looking at me with a concerned expression, as though he was hiding something. Although we had been together for many years, I couldn't read the emotion in his eyes, but tonight, I felt like something was wrong. "Can you sit down for a minute? I need to talk," he said, his voice low and slightly trembling. I looked at him, a little surprised, but still followed his request, unable to understand why he seemed so uneasy. In all the years we had been together, he had never looked this way, especially when there was something important to share. I guessed a serious conversation was about to happen. "There's something I need to admit to you," he continued, his gaze not meeting mine but staring at the floor, as if he was trying to avoid the truth. "I'm in love with someone else, and that person is your sister." Those words hit me like a slap in the face. I couldn't breathe. My heart seemed to stop for a few seconds. Everything shattered in an instant. He loved my sister? This was crazy. I couldn't believe it. For all the years I had trusted him, thought he was the perfect partner, now he confessed that his feelings weren't just for me. What are you saying?" I tried to keep my voice steady, but his words felt like a storm crashing down on me. "She's my sister. How could you?" "I know," he replied, not looking at me, "but I can't control my feelings. I love you, but I can't lie anymore. I can't keep living this lie, and I need you to know the truth. I love your sister, and I can't hide that anymore." I felt like I was being sucked into a whirlwind of emotions. My body was shaking, his words piercing through my heart like daggers. I didn't know what to do, didn't know how to react. He had just confessed something I could never have imagined, something that made me feel like everything I knew about love and loyalty had crumbled before me. "So what do you want? What am I supposed to do with this?" I spat, unable to hold back my anger. "You can't just say this and expect me to forgive you right away. What do you think of her? What am I supposed to do when the man I love is in love with my sister?" He looked at me, his eyes filled with regret and sorrow, but I couldn't find any comfort in them. "I don't want to hurt you, but I can't keep pretending. I want us to start over. I want to try for the sake of our daughter." His words echoed in my mind, but I couldn't accept them. It was all too late, too painful. How could I continue living in this lie when he had already betrayed me? After that conversation, I felt like I had lost my soul. Everything in my life had been turned upside down. My husband had confessed his love for my sister, and now I didn't know who to trust or what to do. Our relationship had been tainted by betrayal, and I couldn't go back to the way things were. But I still needed to face my sister. I couldn't keep this secret any longer. Even though I knew it would complicate everything, I decided I had to tell my sister the truth. I couldn't live in a lie any longer. I knew this would hurt her, but if I didn't tell her, I couldn't keep going. So one afternoon, I called her and invited her over. She came quickly, her face worried, as if she knew something was wrong. We sat across from each other in the living room, and I could feel the tension in the air. I looked at her, trying to figure out how to say the truth without hurting her too much. But the truth was the truth, and I couldn't hide it any longer. "Sis, there's something very important I need to tell you," I began, my voice choking. "I've tried to hide it, but I can't anymore." She looked at me, her face filled with concern. "What's going on? Are you worried about something?" I took a deep breath and decided to speak plainly. "My husband. He loves you, sis. He admitted it to me." My sister sat still, not saying anything at first. She stared at me as if she couldn't believe what I had just said. After a moment, she spoke, her voice filled with confusion and pain. "Are you serious? He loves me?" I nodded, my eyes starting to fill with tears. "I didn't want to tell you this, but I couldn't keep the truth inside. He's been in love with you all this time. I can't keep hiding it from you." My sister lowered her head, her hands clenched tightly, her eyes red. She didn't say anything, just sat there quietly as tears began to fall down her face. I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I really didn't know. What should I do? Her apologies only made the pain worse. I didn't know how to react, even though I understood she wasn't to blame in this situation. But I felt betrayed by both my husband and the sister I had loved. I can't live in this lie anymore. I can't stay here, living like this. My sister hugged me, but I didn't feel comforted. I could sense her helplessness in her embrace. She couldn't change anything, and neither could I go back. What can I do to help you, sis? I don't know what to do. I looked at her, filled with contradiction. She loved me, but how could I continue this relationship when everything had shattered like this? I felt a growing distance between us, as if we were no longer sisters. After the conversation with my sister, I was left with a mixture of emotions: guilt, anger, and a deep sense of betrayal. Everything seemed to be unraveling around me. My sister, devastated by the truth, was trying to apologize for something she had no control over, but I couldn't find it in me to forgive her, nor could I blame her. It wasn't her fault, but it felt like everything I knew had been torn apart. Now my thoughts turned to my husband. I froze. His words struck me harder than I anticipated. You still love me after everything? How can you say that? I do, he said softly, his voice barely a whisper. But I also love her, and I can't pretend it isn't true. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for everything I've done to you. I didn't know how to react. His confession was raw, but it didn't change the fact that everything had already fallen apart. How could I reconcile the man I thought I knew with the person who had done this to me? How could I still trust him after all of this? He looked at me, waiting for some kind of response, but I was silent. Deep down, I knew this was the end. This was the moment where everything changed, and I could no longer see a way forward with him. I need some time, I finally said, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. I can't do this right now. He nodded, clearly expecting it. I understand. I needed you to hear me out. I stood up, and without saying another word, I left. Walking away from him felt like walking away from the only life I had known. It was hard, painful, but I knew it was the only choice left. The days following the conversation with my husband were the most emotionally draining of my life. I couldn't shake off the feeling that my world had collapsed, and every corner of it seemed to hold a reminder of the betrayal. I barely spoke to my husband after that meeting. He continued texting me, apologizing, asking to meet again, but I couldn't bring myself to face him anymore. His words felt hollow, as if he was just trying to cover the cracks in the foundation that had already crumbled. But despite everything, something kept nagging at me. I hadn't yet told my sister the full truth. She didn't know how deep the betrayal ran, and I knew I couldn't keep hiding this from her. I had already hurt her once by not telling her the truth, but this time, it was different. This wasn't just about the love my husband had for her. This was about everything we had built falling apart, about the lies and broken promises. I had to face her, for both our sakes. One evening, when I couldn't avoid it any longer, I called her. She picked up immediately, her voice tinged with concern, clearly aware that something was wrong. Hey, are you okay? You've been distant. What's going on? She asked. I hesitated, but I knew I had to tell her everything now. I need to talk to you. It's about everything that's been happening. We agreed to meet at her place. My stomach was in knots as I drove over, unsure of how this conversation would go. She had no idea how deep the situation had gotten. She only knew that something was off, and I had to prepare myself for whatever reaction she would have. When I arrived, she welcomed me with a warm hug, but I could feel her anxiety. Come in, sit down. Tell me what's going on, she urged, her voice gentle but anxious. I looked at her, feeling the weight of the truth on my shoulders. I can't keep lying to you anymore, I began, my voice shaking slightly. You have to know what happened with me and with him. She furrowed her brows, confused. What do you mean? What happened? I took a deep breath before continuing, my words tumbling out in a rush. He admitted that he's been in love with you. He's been hiding it for years, and I only found out recently. He confessed it to me, and now he's left me. He doesn't want to be with me anymore, and he doesn't want to be in our daughter's life either. The room fell silent. My sister's face paled, her eyes wide in disbelief. She sat down heavily on the couch, her hand over her mouth. "Oh my God," she whispered. I didn't know. I never meant for this to happen." I couldn't hold back my tears anymore. "It's not your fault," I choked out, wiping my eyes, "but I don't know what to do anymore. I feel like my whole world is falling apart." She reached out and took my hand, her touch warm and comforting, but it didn't ease the hurt inside me. "I never knew. I swear I never wanted this. I don't know what to say." "I don't even know what I want anymore," I said, my voice breaking. "I can't stay here, but I also don't know if I can leave. I can't even look at him the same way. And I don't know what this means for me, for us." She squeezed my hand. "I don't know what to say either, but I'll be here for you. Whatever you decide, I'm here." But as comforting as her words were, I knew there was no going back. The damage was done, and no matter how much my sister loved me, I couldn't escape the truth. My marriage was over, and I was alone, with only a painful, uncertain future ahead. The days after that conversation with my sister were a blur. I felt like I was drifting through life, numb to everything around me. I couldn't focus at work, I couldn't find peace at home. My mind kept racing, playing back every conversation, every moment I had with my husband, trying to figure out where it all went wrong. But no matter how much I analyzed it, I kept coming back to the same conclusion. He betrayed me. And worse, he didn't just betray me, he betrayed us, the family we had built together. After the confrontation with my sister, I knew I couldn't stay in this city any longer. Every corner, every street seemed to remind me of the life I once had, the dreams I once shared with him. It was all too much, too painful. I needed a fresh start, a new beginning, somewhere far away. I started looking into places I could go, places where I could breathe again, where no one would know my past and the mess my life had become. A small town up north came to mind, one where a close high school friend of mine had settled. She had moved there years ago after marrying, and the life she described sounded like something I could use right now. Simple, peaceful, and quiet. It was a place where I could start over, where I could find some space for myself and for my daughter. I didn't talk to my sister about it. She had been supportive, but I knew how difficult it would be for her to let me go. I was already breaking her heart with the truth about our marriage, and I didn't want to make her feel even more guilty. But deep down, I knew this was the best choice for me. I needed to get away from all the chaos, from all the memories that kept dragging me down. The more I thought about it, the more it felt like the only way forward. The town was affordable, and I could easily find a small rental home to get by until the divorce was finalized. It would give me time to think, to heal, and to decide what kind of life I wanted for myself and my daughter. The thought of starting fresh, of leaving behind the pain, was both terrifying and liberating at the same time. But I knew I had no other option. I started making plans in secret, researching schools, looking at apartments, and figuring out how I would get everything together. I didn't want anyone to stop me, not even my sister. I was afraid that if she knew, she would try to convince me to stay, and I wasn't sure if I was strong enough to resist her plea. Then, one afternoon, I texted my husband. I needed to let him know what I was doing. I wasn't asking for his approval. I knew he would never understand, not after everything that had happened. But I had to inform him that I was leaving, that I was taking our daughter and moving on with my life. The message I sent was simple. I'm leaving. I'm moving to another city. I need to find peace and figure out my life. I don't need your permission, but I wanted you to know. It felt strange to send those words. After everything we had been through, after all the years we spent together, this was how it had come to an end. A text message. There was no longer anything left to say. He could call, he could beg, but it didn't matter. I had made up my mind. My phone buzzed almost immediately. He had replied. But I didn't look at it. I couldn't. There was nothing left for me to hear from him. It was over. And even though the pain was still there was also a strange sense of relief. I was finally taking control of my life, and for the first time in a long while, I felt like I was doing the right thing. But as I sat there, looking at my phone, I realized that no matter what I did next, nothing would ever be the same again. The life I had known was gone, and I was about to step into the unknown, hoping that whatever came next would be better than what I was leaving behind.